My name is Aimee Cote. I am a marriage, family, and individual therapist. And the title of the talk is Beyond Behaviors, an innovative approach to challenging behavior for professionals and parents. And this presentation is for professionals and parents caring for kids with challenging behavior, sometimes referred to as spirited, high need, explosive, non-compliant, the list goes on. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my screen layout set. Yeah, there are a lot of words, names used to refer to kids like this. My interest is partially professional, but also partially personal because I am a proud parent of a kid like this. She's really taught me a lot about what's important in life and how people grow and learn. So I'm grateful for that. And Beyond Behaviors is actually the name of the book and training, Beyond Behaviors Using Brain Science and Compassion to Understand and Solve Children's Behavioral Challenges by Mona Delahooke. And so you can buy the book or sign up for the training through Pezzy. It's really thorough and very interesting. So one of my favorite quotes from the book and training is, when we see a behavior that is problematic or confusing, the first question we should ask isn't, how do we get rid of it? But rather, what is this telling us about the child? And so when we jump immediately to how do we get rid of it, we're doing the child a disservice by trying to eliminate something that is quite possibly an adaptive behavior. And we do parents a disservice because a lot of times they blame themselves for not being consistent or not being good parents. And then we sometimes get ourselves into a frustrating position by by trying to eliminate something without understanding really how is this serving the child. So there are three main limitations to the traditional approaches to helping children with behavioral challenges. Not determining the etiology of behaviors before we try to change them. So are they top down or bottom up? Not considering individual differences and failing to use a developmental roadmap to ensure that we're using the right approach at the right time. If anyone is unfamiliar, top-down refers to behaviors that are guided by the frontal cortex. So executive function, logic, reason, planning, all those good things. Bottom-up refers to behaviors that originate in lower parts of the brain, the hindbrain, and reflect emotions, sense of safety versus danger, and fight, flight, or freeze responses. And I'm going to focus most of my talk on top down versus bottom up and the child's perception of safety. But the book and course spend a significant amount of time discussing social emotional development and individual differences. So if I have time at the end, I will give you more information depending on what people want. And I also want to put it out there that if you have a question about anything, just jump in. Regarding top down or bottom up, let's look at a case. Or you may want to think about your own children or the children you work with. But if not, here is a child. By the time Stuart hit second grade, his teachers had pegged him as a problem child. They knew he came from a loving home and could discern right from wrong, but he frequently started fights and had outbursts that caused classroom disruptions. Stuart had a number of professionals in his life trying to help him, including school counselors, a private therapist, and a developmental pediatrician. His parents and team were relieved when Stuart controlled his behaviors, sometimes for days or even weeks, But then, seemingly out of nowhere, he would explode with anger at a peer, sibling, or teacher. His difficulties only deepened with time, and eventually a psychiatrist offered a diagnosis: oppositional defiant disorder. His parents sent him to a series of special schools and even residential treatment centers, but despite elaborate efforts by many people, he made only modest progress. So basically, he needed some bottom-up interventions. In order to know whether a behavior is top-down or bottom-up, we need to perceive a child in two ways. One, we need to understand the child's social emotional development. And two, we need to be able to read a child's cues in the moment that help reveal what underlies the behavior. And so this is where the concept of neuroception comes in. Dr. Stephen Porges introduced this term to denote the brain's and body's ongoing subconscious surveillance of safety and threat in the environment. Our brain's subconscious TSA agent working hard to constantly keep us safe. So it's constantly evaluating safety, danger outside of our conscious awareness. If a child, or anyone really, but falsely senses a threat, it's still neuroception. It's still a threat to the system. And her brain and body will go into the red or blue pathways, depending on the degree of perceived threat. So what are these pathways? They are part of polyvagal theory developed by Dr. Porges. It's a very hot topic nowadays. There are a lot of trainings and books about it. So it's very interesting and useful clinically. But basically, these pathways describe our internal state and resulting behavior. So the blue pathway is shutting down, isolating, tuning out. The green pathway is feeling safe and engaging with others and learning and thinking. And sympathetic is the red one. It's fight or flight, striking out, running away. So when we see a child and we want to know, is this behavior top down or bottom up? We look at these. The only one that is top down is the green one. That's the only one where you really have access to top-down thinking, to the frontal cortex. Both the blue and the red are bottom-up processes, and that's where you see meltdowns or kids shutting down or freezing. So with the green one, you have connection, you have safety, communication, learning, all the good stuff. With the red pathway, you're in, meltdown territory. And those are a lot of the people that come to me. These are behaviors that get our attention, for better or worse, the attention of people outside the family at times. Less often you see people bring kids in the blue pathway because they don't cause a lot of problems. They tend to shut down, isolate, and the risk is that they actually are dissociating just from this overwhelming stress. And so we want to pay attention to those kids too, and do whatever we can to get everyone back in the green pathway. So how do we work with behavior from the bottom up? Bottom-up behaviors require bottom-up interventions. This was hugely impactful for me, realizing that top-down interventions won't be effective to deal with a bottom-up meltdown. And what are these top-down interventions? Some are very popular nowadays, like mindfulness, awareness of emotions, social skills training, and those are great things. But but they aren't very helpful until the child is 1, at the right level of social emotional development, and 2, in the green pathway. So a lot of parents find that their kids won't talk about their emotional state during or after a meltdown. And that means that either they aren't in the green pathway right now, or that they aren't developmentally ready, or both. They may need time and safety to get to the point where mindfulness and awareness will be helpful. As a therapist, I see adults who have a hard time figuring out how they feel. So this isn't something that's all squared away by age 18. Adults are challenged with this as well at times. When we fail to recognize that many behaviors represent the body's response to stress, not intentional misbehavior, we expend effort on techniques designed to help children logically connect their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors when they simply can't yet. And so here's a case that we see a child move through bottom up to top down. Kira was a spirited child who had a rough start in kindergarten. When her parents would drop her off at school, she frequently cried and then kept to herself most of the day, avoiding interactions with her peers. When a school team did an evaluation, they discovered that Kira had a mild speech delay and difficulties with social skills. The school placed her in a speech and language class, a program that aimed to teach children about feelings and communication through activities, such as using flashcards to learn to recognize facial expressions. But participating in the group didn't improve Kira's behaviors. In fact, it exacerbated her problems because she so feared the speech therapist calling on her that her anxiety and hypervigilance increased. Kira's challenge was learning how to self-regulate, how to maintain or return to a calm, attentive state. How do we learn self-regulation? We learn to self-regulate by co-regulating with a self-regulated adult. We don't just learn it on our own or from a book. It's an experience. It is a co-regulation, very powerful therapeutic engagement connection. A self-regulated adult is able to engage in what can be called therapeutic use of self. So therapeutic use of self, it's getting into that green pathway with kids. As providers and parents, we need to put ourselves into the equation. The most important thing isn't what we say or what we do, for that matter. It's how we are internally. And this moves the focus from behavioral strategies to an emphasis on relational joy. So therapeutic use of self means engaging with kids in the green pathway by the adult being self-regulated and co-regulating with a child. And this is a huge challenge for parents and professionals, especially if you're with a kid who is melting down, because we are social beings. We pick up on each other's emotional states. And so it's a big challenge for the adult to try to stay in the green pathway. And this isn't a way of blaming adults or saying that they're the cause of the behavior, particularly the parents, but they can be a big part of the solution. So when we look back at Kira, the therapist started by assessing her autonomic regulation, or the color pathways. What was holding her back from engagement with peers in the green pathway? She focused on helping Kira's mother build up the green pathway as the first step to supporting Kira's development. Her main goal, helping them feel safe and have fun together. By the end of the summer, Kira's demeanor changed. She began approaching other children at the local playground and spontaneously playing with them. Her previously immature social problem-solving abilities now began to resemble those of her peers. the therapist plan worked. She used a developmental and relationship-based approach rather than the generic approach that attempted to teach Kira's social skills. Under the conditions of relational safety, her social engagement skills, that development emerged. In time, the concerning behaviors, the school refusal, avoiding peers, and lack of play resolved. So there we see an example of using bottom-up interventions to bring a child into sort of a top-down approach. And so another big part of this approach is personalized attunement. It's a way to tailor our interactions to meet each child's physical and emotional needs. So we move from a focus on behaviors to a focus on social emotional development and individual differences. As you can see, sort of from the story about Kira, it was really a particular situation that she had in the special classroom where she was afraid of the teacher calling on her, and that alone put her into sort of a stress response, maybe the red pathway. And so that is something that's really unique to her and to the context of her situation. And play is something that I recommend to all parents. And play that helps a kid, like it works from the body up or the bottom up to top down. This is therapeutic play with certain characteristics. Play requires social interaction with an attentive and engaged adult. Both are in the green pathway. The child or teen sets the agenda. It's characterized by reciprocity and mutual engagement, and there's a back and forth rhythm. Okay, both people are active and engaged and sort of taking turns. I do get the question about the child or teen setting the agenda. The child can choose the activity within reason. So if a parent says, okay, we'll do whatever you want with stuff we already have at home, I mean, that's fine. It doesn't need, you don't need to go to an amusement park or buy new art supplies. Play builds. Play is the work of children. I think it was Piaget who said that. It allows you to stay in the green pathway, and dip your toe in the red. It builds a bridge between bottom up and top down. It incorporates the 6 stages of social emotional development, which I will, I'll go over that if we have time at the end. And play is the most therapeutic thing we can do to build top-down emotional and behavioral control. So the basics of this therapeutic play for parents: unplug and let go of distractions, have fun, relax, and stay curious. Follow the child's lead and value her themes and interests. Let go of an agenda, be interactive and engaged. Refrain from teaching. So you aren't teaching, you aren't correcting. And connect to your inner child. Okay, so I have much more time. So now I'm going to go into individual differences. So as I mentioned, there are the individual differences and the social emotional development. And these are also really important aspects of this approach. So the individual differences are factors specific to the child. Interventions have to be tailored. Some of the areas we need to consider are the body, sensations, thoughts, and feelings. So the idea slide, which is sort of this framework for drilling down through the individual differences. It's an acronym to inquire about the child's history and track behaviors to discover patterns. Determine what circumstances contribute to the child's distress. Examine what our investigation reveals about the triggers and underlying causes, and address developmental challenges contributing to the behaviors through our interactions and targeted therapeutic support. And so if anyone is interested in doing this training, they supply you with a lot of worksheets to help gather all of this information and assess sort of these causes of behaviors. So it could be medical, could be something to do with the body. It could be sensory. And I see quite a few kids who seem to be quite sensitive in terms of different sensory experiences. So let me describe a case. It's another case that Dr. Delahook goes over. By second grade, Stuart's teachers had pegged him as a problem child. Oh, well, I already read the case about Stuart, but if we go back to that and we think about the individual differences, and we look at it using the metaphor of the iceberg, right? You have Stuart's behavior, melting down, attacking peers, and then weeks go by and nothing, and then out of the blue, meltdown. You know, when you see that and you see just the behavior, you might think that Stuart was purposely misbehaving, that he was attention seeking, oppositional defiant disorder, that he's testing limits, lazy, avoidant, poor parenting, inconsistent discipline, or an intellectual disability. But then through drilling down with the team of professionals, you go through the physiological state. So these are things that influence, you know, the origin of the behavior. These are the things that are under the waterline. Physiological state, faulty neuroception, emotional responses. So for example, shame or embarrassment. And so I think that that's something that I see quite a bit, which is children who melt down and explode have a lot of shame about it. And that does not help in terms of working with it top down. You see stress responses, so fight, flight, or freeze. You see adaptations to sensory motor processing or preferences. And so you may see that with kids who are neurodivergent. There may be issues of physical pain or discomfort. And then there's also thoughts and ideas or beliefs like, I'm a bad kid. And so if anyone has any questions or anything you want to share, just jump right in. And so for me personally, I'm wondering, when I see kids with explosive behaviors, how many of them are dealing with undiagnosed sensory motor, language, or other developmental issues? And I think with a lot of these kids, at least the ones that I have seen, it might be subclinical. And so I see a role for evaluation, even if the child doesn't qualify for a diagnosis. If you are seeing signs of, say, sensory integration issues or language issues. And the purpose isn't to label the child, but rather to identify specific struggles she may face. And hopefully the results can point to ways to support the child. What are her specific challenges? Okay, and then the third prong in this whole approach is development, social emotional development. So here is the developmental roadmap idea. So it's based on the work of Greenspan and Weider. There are 6 processes of social emotional development that we start going through when we are born. As a tiny baby, the first stage is the capacity for calm, alert attention. It's state regulation. It's getting in a green pathway so that you can begin to try to make sense of the world. Then you move through trust and engagement with others, onto nonverbal communication.
None of the teachers that I mentioned it to.
Sorry? Okay. Social problem solving, symbolic thought, building bridges with others. And so the important thing to realize is that the first 4 levels are all characterized by bottom-up reactions. It isn't till you get to the point of symbolic thought and building bridges with others that you really have access to top-down thinking. So yes, and bottom-up processing leads to top-down thinking over time as we go through the social emotional development. And so, as I mentioned, the book contains tons and tons of information to assess, to drill down through all the specificities of each kid's experience. And so here are some that are along the lines of the social emotional development. And these correspond to the different processes. So are we engaged and enjoying each other? Are we going back and forth, verbally or non-verbally? Are we solving problems together? Are we talking, writing, playing, imagining, reflecting? Are we building bridges between each other? And there are all these worksheets. For example, this is the first process, the regulation and attention. For each of the stages, the book and the course, they give you worksheets to sort of assess where a child is. And so realize that these processes can also change minute to minute, because as you get into a stress response, fight, flight, or freeze, you're less able to build bridges with each other. So it's something that occurs over childhood through development, but also can change moment to moment based on the situation. And so this is the developmental iceberg I mentioned before. And this also shows sort of all the different things to consider when you're trying to understand a kid's challenging behavior. Internal body processes, sensations, emotions, developmental capacities, ability to plan and execute actions, memories, thoughts, ideas. And so let me see, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Okay. Can someone say something? I just see a completely black screen.
We're here.
Okay.
We're listening.
We're here.
I don't see anything. Okay, so I just wanted to ask if does anyone have any questions or any reflections, or have you ever tried to apply these ideas? Do you think it's relevant to your work?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yes. I go in and out of different schools in and around Paris and help support teachers to understand more about exactly these kinds of processes and how you can adapt and modify what's happening in the classrooms for the students that they have in front of them. So I'm thinking of a few kids that have challenging behaviors and helping teachers understand more about how it's not deliberate, it's not personal, it's not about teacher effect at all. And it's really about trying to help meet those needs. So
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. I think it's extremely challenging for parents and professionals for us to stay in the green pathway when a child starts melting down. And so that goes back to sort of the therapeutic use of self. And, you know, can I stay in the green pathway to hopefully co-regulate with this kid and help them get back into the green pathway as well? And it's not easy. It's really hard.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of professionals who don't see that as their job, it's further challenging to help coach adults on how to do that effectively in order to help a student that they're with. And that's kind of where I see a lot of hangups happen, need a lot more coaching.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay. And remind me, what is your role again? I'm
an inclusive special education teacher, but I started my own company to do coaching and consulting for schools. So
okay.
Out of a lot of schools, kind of working as special education teacher for schools that don't have someone on their staff full time. Going in and out, working with that, and then kind of helping teachers develop understandings around engagement, critical thinking, and how we can get all students on track to be more engaged in what they're learning.
Okay. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I definitely want to share information with other professionals who are interested in the approach. I'm just seeing the note from Joanna. Bye, Joanna. So yeah, I want to make more connections to have people to collaborate with. So that's great to know. Now I'm just going to check and see if there are any other slides that that would be useful for you guys. Are people interested in okay, actually, I do have a few more things that are, if no one has any other questions, that are more relevant to kids with who aren't neurotypical. So I will just go and share this again. Okay, I'm having an issue with Zoom. Okay, here we go. Share screen. Okay. And so this is disruptive behaviors as state regulators or preferences. And so these might be behaviors that that professionals try to eliminate. There's certainly things that can be problematic, legitimately, of course, but sort of shifting to see them as serving a function of helping someone regulate their autonomic state. So behavioral challenges as seen through the polyvagal lens as state regulators and not as intentional, maladaptive, or non-compliant behaviors. It's essential to understand children who have experienced toxic stress, trauma, systemic bias and racism, differences in brain wiring, including autism and other neurodiverse conditions. And then disruptive behaviors as state regulators in ASD, automatic behaviors of the nervous system to help children on the red pathway to get back to the green. They're subconscious, survival-based, and not designed by the child to be purposely oppositional, test limits, or make teachers or other adults uncomfortable or upset. When we target these adaptive behaviors, we tell the child that they can't trust their body's reactions. So then it would be about working with a kid to make sure they're on the green pathway, to make sure the bottom up, that platform is there to support them. And then if they have specific behaviors that are helpful to them, that aren't harmful to others, maybe that's something we need to look at a little differently. And then I wanted to share sort of, the plethora of worksheets, checklists, etc., provided by the training in the book. And but so these are some of the things that you go through and try to figure out sort of, okay, are these, for example, are these sensory experiences related to the child's behavior? There are kids with who melt down because of scratchy clothing or seams in their socks, but they aren't showing a whole lot of behaviors or other types of signs of a developmental issue. We also look at tracking a child's stress load in real time. So this is like the minute to minute, which pathway are they on? And then worksheets for the provider or parents. So how do I provide the cues of relational safety for this child? And I think that is it. That is it.